Now, I got this book and I heard it on audiobook when I ride the truck. Uh, well, some of his points make sense. Now, only thing I'm gonna base it on is see, my grandmother came from Mississippi in the 30s to Chicago. She was born in 1917 and to Chicago when she was 16. That's all I'm basing because she used to tell me different things, so I'm basing my stuff on that. Let's continue.
These people are creating a terrible problem in our cities. They can't or won't hold a job. They flout the law constantly and neglect their children.
When she came to Chicago during the Great Depression, came to Chicago, so
They drink too much, and they're
Al Capone was walking the street. I mean, walking down the street. The city of Chicago wasn't expanded like it is now. These other neighborhoods. I don't even know how far it extended to. I'm gonna say 63rd maybe. I don't even think it extended to 79, but you can look that up yourself.
their moral standards would shame an alley cat. For some reason or other, they absolutely refuse to accommodate themselves to any kind of decent, civilized life.
And see, this is not even just like people say black, black, black. It's different classes of black people. And my grandmother said when she came to the city, she came from the country, and she was saying, I didn't know how the city was till I came here. I never lived in the city. I lived in the farm. Now my grandfather, the one she married, that's my mama's father. He's from Chicago, born and raised. He's from somewhere like 43rd Lake Park, down in that way, where they still got the most old buildings. He's from one. He's not from one of those buildings. Not from one, but he's from that area. I can go into him at a later date. But anyway, it's a different class of people. Most people, to live, blacks live on the south side. That's where you want to be. They had got different, people were trying to achieve. Everybody wasn't trying to be no rapper or nothing, but they was trying to achieve different things. Let him continue.
This was said in 19.
This was said in 19.
These people are creating a terrible problem in our cities. They can't or won't hold a job. They flout the law constantly and neglect their children. They drink too much, and their moral standards would shame an alley cat. For some reason or other, they absolutely refuse.
See, that would be a low class person. That's what they call low class. I don't care, black, white, whatever color. That's called low class. You don't got no class because you don't got no values, no standards. Right now in 2023, a lot of people don't. I ain't even saying call no color. You know the ones because he just described the characteristics. Now you figure it out.
Refuse to accommodate themselves to any kind of decent, civilized life. This was said in 1956 in Indianapolis, not about blacks or other minorities, but about poor whites from the South. Nor was Indianapolis unique in this respect. A 19
But see, and that's a KKK state. And in the 30s, that's a KKK. We do history on the KKK. Indiana is KKK. That's not where it started. It started in Pulaski, Tennessee. And then that became one of the, they said they had over 1 million followers in the 30s. And it wasn't just about, people think it's all about the black, just killing black people. It's not. Go do your homework. That just goes into the class thing. And people say, well, I don't want to conform to this. But that has to do with class and value and systems. You have to be a part of that system to make it work. It's certain things that goes with it. So you say, well, that's like somebody say, oh, that's white dressing, that's black dressing. No, it's not. It's a system.
51 survey in Detroit found that white Southerners living there were considered undesirable by 21% of those surveyed, compared to 13% who ranked blacks the same way. In the late 1940s, a Chicago employer said frankly, I told the guard at the plant gate to tell the hillbillies that there were no openings. When poor whites from the South moved into northern cities to work in war plants during
See, we look at white, not me. Most black people just look white people as white people. No, they break down. They got groups. depending on the phase when they came to the United States. You know, you got your Polish or whatever, and what cities they settle in. Down south, black, white, pardon me, whites are all just the same breed. Like I say, hillbillies or whatever, they're like the same breed. They're like all those same ones. But when you go into the cities, you will see the breakdown.
During the Second World War. Occasionally, a white Southerner would find that a flat or a furnished room had just been rented when the landlord heard his Southern accent. More is involved here than a mere parallel between blacks and Southern whites. What is involved is a common subculture that goes back for centuries, which has encompassed everything.
It's Southern blacks are different from Northern blacks once they come up here and they acclimate to certain values, if they pick up the values. And even if whoever pick up certain values, they become a part of that value system. Some people don't, or some reject. And you can see it. That's what goes into the system. Like, keeps the best line, who dresses this, who cleans this. Like, I've been in some people's houses, they're so filthy. Like, who raised you?
From ways of
I'm not talking about old people. I'm talking about young people, like 20 years old.
talking to attitudes toward education, violence, and sex, and which originated not in the South, but in those parts of the British Isles from which white Southerners came. That culture long ago died out where it originated in Britain.
And a lot of those people, I told you, like I said on one of my other videos, if you go do your history on England, a lot of the people who came to the United States in that period were people who they was ejected out of the penitentiary. They were saying, hey, you can't be in England no more, but we're going to send you to the Newfoundland, the new land. You can go to the new land. We're just going to drop you off, but you ain't coming back here because you were deviant in all their behaviors. And now a lot of these people are the offspring of these people. And a lot of people don't even know nothing about history. They just know word of mouth. They don't even go pick up a book and read. It's documented. The history is documented by the people who made it. By the people who made it. And it tells you everything. It's different books. You can't read one little book. You got to read a history book.
While surviving in the American South. Then it largely died out among both white and black Southerners, while still surviving today in the poorest and worst of the urban black ghettos. It is not uncommon for a culture to survive longer where it is transplanted and to retain characteristics lost in its place of origin. The French spoken in Quebec and the Spanish spoken in Mexico contain words and phrases that have long since become archaic in France and Spain. Regional German dialects persisted among Germans living in the United States after those dialects.
That's right. I was telling somebody one time while I was speaking Spanish, I said, oh, it's a different dialect on the east versus the west. They didn't even know what the word dialect means. They got to an argument with me and everything. And it was funny because I told the guy, I said, dialect don't mean what I say, it's just like a different version. That don't mean dialect don't mean that. So he go home. I was cool with him, so we was going back and forth. They was laughing at me. I didn't say nothing. They was like, you ain't saying nothing because we know right, go home. He's like, I told my wife what you said. And he apologized. He said, I thought dialect meant something else. I'm like, I told you what it meant. You know what I'm saying? I told them to even go look on the computer. They wouldn't even go look it up. That's what made me like, you so belligerent against what I'm saying, you won't even go look it up. Go look up the words to see what I'm saying, if it's correct or not, because you're so stuck in your way.
Had begun to die out in Germany itself. A scholar specializing in the history of the South has likewise noted among white Southerners archaic word forms, while another scholar has pointed out the continued use in that region of terms that were familiar at the time of the first Queen Elizabeth. The card game whist is today played almost exclusively by blacks, especially low-income blacks, though in the 18th century it was played by the British upper classes and has since then evolved into bridge. The history of the evolution of this game is indicative of a much broader pattern of cultural evolution.
I don't know what whist is. I know they call bid whiz or whatever. I don't know. I don't play that. I think I was taught that when I was young, but I was never into. The only game I like to play is chess and Monopoly. That's it. I don't like to play all them other card games because it'd be like it's like reminds me like when you in jail or something. Like when you don't got nothing to do, you just do that. And most of that when And then some people turn it into gambling, and gambling always end up to fight and argument. And I don't like all that drama.
and much more weighty things. Southern whites not only spoke the English language in very different ways from whites in other regions. Their churches, their roads, their homes, their music, their education, their food, and their sex lives were all sharply different from those of other whites.
But if you go on the South, it's like that now. It's a total different. Like I say, it's great Southern hospitality, but a lot of stuff they do is totally different, and they thinking is different. Their values, but I'm like, you can't change it. I can't change it. But it's been going on for hundreds of years. That's what it was built on. That's the foundation. Like they said, that's that old money. They said old money. They talking about when the people came off the boat and came to that land. Mississippi, Alabama, Florida. The generational is so deep. It's in the roots. It's planted in the roots.
The history of this redneck or cracker culture is more than a curiosity. It has contemporary significance because of its influence on the economic.
And cracker is not a disrespectful term to a Southern cracker. You go look up the word cracker and the origin in the South, like black people say, oh, that cracker. Hey, they take pride in that. If they are the cracker, they is the one who cracked the whip on you. See, people be saying words, but you're not disrespecting them. You just proving the point that they already saying.
Economic and social evolution of vast numbers of people, millions of blacks and whites, and its continuing influence on the lives and deaths of a residual population in America's black ghettos, which has still not completely escaped from that culture. From early in American history, foreign visitors and domestic travelers alike were struck by cultural contrasts between the white population of the South and that of the rest of the country in general, and of New England in particular. In the early 19th century, Alexis de Tocqueville contrasted white Southerners with white Northerners in his classic Democracy in America, and Frederick Law Olmsted did the same later in his books about his travels through the antebellum South, notably Cotton Kingdom. De Tocqueville set a pattern when he concluded that almost all the differences which may be noticed between the Americans in the southern and in the northern states have originated in slavery. Olmsted likewise attributed the differences between white Southerners and white Northerners to the existence of slavery in the South. So did widely read antebellum Southern writer Hinton Helper, who declared that slavery, and nothing but slavery, has retarded the progress and prosperity of our portion of the Union. Just
Because there's so much literature out. You're talking hundreds of years prior to the TV or the programming before we were actually being programmed. That's what TV program means, is the program. That's what it was made. So everything that they put on there as a program is not true. It's the program, the individual, like, if you know about the mind and how it works, it could be something, it's like you catch something and they say it's reflex, that's how fast your mind working. But when you ingesting all this information, it could be negative or positive. It all depends on how you filter it. That's the human body and all this other stuff. It's That's why school is always important because it got the book, the knowledge. But now, I mean, just have a piece of paper to show, but you can study it on your own now because you got the cell phone, you got everything, you got computers, but you got to research and get it. And then you got to get some hard books, hardcover books. And then you got to be able to interpret. Some people
as
can't.
they explained regional differences between whites by slavery, so many others in a later era would explain differences between blacks and whites nationwide by slavery. Plausible as these explanations may seem in both cases, they will not stand up under a closer scrutiny of history. It is perhaps understandable that the great overwhelming moral curse of slavery has presented a tempting causal explanation of the peculiar subculture of Southern whites, as well as that of blacks. Yet this same subculture had existed among Southern whites and their ancestors in those parts of the British Isles from which they came, long before they had ever seen a black slave. The nature of this subculture, among people who were called rednecks and crackers in Britain before they ever saw America, needs to be explored before turning to the question of its current status among ghetto blacks and how developments in the larger society have affected its evolution.